supplemented in the way the commentary by Lama Tsongkhapa. Here what is said is that when one meditates on emptiness, then when one comes to the conclusion, oh, this is that absence of lack of inherent existence. So thinking, this is that absence of the lack of inherent existence. If one takes that to mind and meditates on that, there is a fault with that, because the moment you think, oh, this is the kind of emptiness, this is the lack of inherent existence, one creates a distance. One creates a distance between the mind and the object.
아니 진짜 쟤네 아니 많이 버티는 샤 실로디기 지나 유디다 아니 텐지 인상 정신이 요 말했으니까 굉장히 디기 토네 나심에 보고 매저로 카가 차루다 텐지 인상 정신 텐지 인상 라주 라주에 민도 되다 다 파게 주체디 랑기 외네 매봐 정신기 매봐 세디 고메디 주체디샤 디제바이나 쟤네 많이 버 인상 정신이 민도 야나면은 텐지 인상 정신이 민도라나 kunzunigi yudi chiba charuwa. Dende malabaji, zene manye dege ngalu kan toni gomlana, di gomdan di dang, dende yinbi jumzengi, toni gomdan di kaga chana, toni midrawa nying chadur. Di susu lo dan sewarwa, di chadang loga yobade.
So this saying that this kind of distance here is that everyone has that kind of sense of a distance, that this is not really emptiness. Well, that this needs to be analyzed. There needs to be analysis done with regards to that. But actually, it would not be correct to say that this non-findability upon searching for an object, that just not finding the object, or that kind of just that absence in that moment, that is emptiness. That is not correct, because otherwise the emptiness that is kind of taken to mind, if one holds that emptiness, that just not being able to find it, one were to call that emptiness, then the emptiness that one takes to mind after one thought of dependent arising, and this emptiness would be different. It would be a different type of emptiness, because the emptiness one comes to after taking dependent arising as the reasoning, the type of emptiness, the kind of ultimate view one comes to realize independence on dependent arising, is that the object does not exist from its own side, because it is dependent on causes and conditions and so forth. So that is the kind of emptiness we're looking for here, the lack of existence from its own side by reason of, which is understood in dependence on the reason that phenomena exist dependently or interdependently. In the first case, it's more like, well, you look for the object and you don't find it. That's a different type of emptiness, so those are different. Really what one should be able to realize is, upon not finding the object, when looking among its bases of interpretation and so forth, if I'm not able to find it, so therefore the object cannot exist from its own side. If one comes to that kind of understanding, then the emptiness would be the same. So in other words, it would be the same type of emptiness if I were to think, oh, because phenomena are interdependent, therefore they do not exist from their own side. Or because the object cannot be found among its bases of interpretation and so forth, so therefore it does not exist from its own side. In that case, you actually end up with the same type of emptiness. 如果你只是从找不到这个角度去看的话，其实到最后都是空空的。那你这样变成说空是不是有两个？真的是这里많이 외는 다가라는 녀버 샤시에디라 다 토마 공기나 대대기 다 돈이도 요즘 제바스만 기지 쉬고 딜레도 전에 다다 머신에 디멘체디 다 기시다 신이 유나 다 기루고나는 용초고 왔다 이 신이디 제산다 디지디 니 롱장뒤에 기르위 기비 롱장이었다 가산도 저를 디타요만 다 간들이 케미도 제제리 많이니 디기지시는 다 토말 얘기도 제바스만 기지 쉬고 제바스만 있는 남자기 추순 조단데 거와 다 제나미다 비참 베나니 동바신 자야 제소세 조단데 거와 디 따로 창림도 바게다 So likewise, when we talk about here not finding something, not finding an object, so that is just that not findability after having looked for the object or emptiness, then what we usually, the kind of awareness that usually realizes emptiness. So initially, the mind that usually initially realizes emptiness, the first type of mind that newly realizes emptiness is an inferential cognizer. So an inferential cognizer is an awareness which depends on reasoning. It depends on reasoning in the sense that it depends on a correct syllogism. So, for example, Geshe-la gave the example. So, a correct syllogism is expressed by saying whatever is a product is necessarily an impermanent. For example, a vase is impermanent. Likewise, sound is impermanent. So, using that kind of syllogism, so sound is impermanent because it's a product, for example, like a vase. So, these kind of three modes of a correct syllogism, these are the basis on the basis of which, or independence on which, one can then generate an inferential cognizer that realizes emptiness independence on reasoning. So just not finding something, that kind of reasoning is missing. Just looking for an object and not finding it, since that reasoning that is associated with the correct syllogism, since that is missing, well, how can one then newly generate an inferential cognizer that newly realizes emptiness? That would not be possible.
아니 대권은 주비 링고르 매버디 돈이 인신 숨을 잡고 세치비 님이 비지다 버다. 네 가르스나 딜라 먼저 고단점이 여러. 아니 이 잡고드니 룸에 뭐 보여요. 야 대권은 주비 링고르 매버 돈이 마인세기 잡고드니 룸 보여. 인 잡고에 여러 마인 잡고요. 나 초니가 테스트 용되다.
And likewise with regard to the mind that observes the kind of the reasoning awareness that perceives suchness. So not existing from the perspective of such an awareness which depends on reasoning, or which is a reasoning consciousness with regard to suchness. So such a reasoning consciousness, not existing from the perspective of such a reasoning consciousness, there are some quotations that say that non-existence, so non-existence from the perspective of such a mind that takes to mind or that analyzes suchness, that is emptiness. Some say that is not emptiness. So there are different kinds of citations where some citations say it is emptiness, some say it is not.
달경은 무책이 된지지 송을 가시그리 동바 땡중기 되나 공지 걸어야 내용이 아마니가 다가랑 돈이 제주고 있어레스 된지지.
So His Holiness is saying that a person who's got a good familiarity, has a good understanding of empty dependent arising, has a good understanding of empty dependent arising, in other words, kind of dependent arising of phenomena in condition of emptiness. That kind of person, when they understand something not being findable after having searched for the object, well, that person will come closer to emptiness.
Tadi tadi kuadi ya kari imi ya samtayre da ko samtang samo buyon chobu da ena ene chinji bege zeni manye ba ani bege sensen bege duchen tin du zeni manye ba chesan tiso en toni ke je mare ani umegi ne chetil le ni zeni manye ba le du toni le tinji ko je le chobu da ta ume ta ju keling ye nang lo le thangbo ka le changshin bi ka le ta zeni manye ba di toni ta da cha mare 광내 야스다 야 냠용스디다 가 냠용 가와스 라고 있는 야스 레디 아니 야제니 많이 받아 가라다 돈이 따다 레임 그래 딘지에 고쳐오다 그래서는 디디갑르디 가멘티즈 참 소요래 아니 라버도 아니 체리베기 제니 많이 보시야디 디 돈이 따다 레임 말했어 디 대상도 센세베기 시기로 와스 디 가멘티 나요다 제가 디 따다디 야세부지 하고
So saying that not being able to find the object upon searching for it, well, this means so many different things, just depending on the person who is looking and depending on what one is looking for. So, for example, if one takes a scientist, when the scientist is unable to find something, so then that non-findability we would not say is emptiness. Or when we talk about a person of the Chittamatra system, when they look for some kind of subtle particles, again, that non-findability would not be characterized as emptiness. It would not be called emptiness. And then from the point of view of the Madhyamika school, well, here, what is the exact thing, the exact measure of what is to be looked for? If one actually does not find that, then one may be able to find the actual emptiness here. but then there are beginners, so those beginners who are new to it, so they look for something, they engage in that kind of analysis, but them not finding something is not necessarily emptiness. So it is really those who have meditated, who have some experience, and what that kind of experience is to be seen, but actually with a certain type of experience, some familiarity due to that, then one can say at some point that looking for an object and not being able to find it, that is emptiness. And then from that perspective, one can then compare that to what scientists do not find, what the Chittamatra school does not find, that is not emptiness. From that perspective, one can then say decisively that this is not emptiness, that non-definability in the case of scientists and so forth.
不是空性，他的行文的方式会让人以为说他讲的似乎是这个意思，所以有这两种不一样的一个理解方式。
其实俺개월 하시기 지디 비슷한 게도 남월 동상 년월 로심에 방 예비 진당 당 중요하스. 되게 동상대 유버제 나용월 이내 뢰 진당디 응원의 민두 예비 예시지 유등이지. 민두 예버되면은 예시기면도 동상 다라 독스마도 其实南我东山年我热心没吧，也别简单子，点的送到。年我热心没吧，也别简单。
So therefore some say that from the perspective of appearance, mere emptiness, from the point of view of certainty, so from the perspective of appearance, mere empty, from the perspective of certainty, lack of inherent existence. So this is the way to apprehend certainty, or this is the certainty with regard to the correct apprehension. So one needs both. One needs to have mere empty from the point of view of appearance, or from the perspective of appearance, and one needs the lack of inherent existence from the perspective or from the point of view of certainty or ascertainment. So this is here described as the mode in which one gains certainty with regard to apprehension.
其实他电子机呢，建呢，人们的民度，人都讲呢，讲到嘛，那罗这个有的，以内，地雷把个西部中国嘛些呢，基基他们尼泊的人们做民度切，那什么西部了，建议了嘛西部这不去，当上这样正当的没定，的学过的是，这细心的的结果的是，的什么的。
So therefore, when one investigates and one investigates and analyzes, and then one comes to the conclusion that nothing exists inherently, so then the first 2 or 3 moments one actually is able to hold that kind of lack of inherent existence, but then if one is not careful, that may just slip away and just have empty aspect. That's all that appears to the mind. So here in that case, one has that empty aspect appearing to the mind from the perspective of the appearance that is there, but the certainty is missing from the point of view of the apprehension or correct certainty or ascertainment, the lack of inherent existence being that which one ascertains. Since that is missing, it's not a correct way to meditate on emptiness.
That DJD any Tawana, Tajamana Joe Mindu Nyamdu Komna, any Mitibi Zenkajiori. The Tinana Titisha, Ramana Joe Mindu Nyamdu Komna, Tony Tenju Mania Gayoris, as a Kobaje to Grilla Nasle, Tida Kazan Latsaki the Chibare, Tila Tila Nigala Wasara, Tony Tenju Zimi Tenzinki in Gayoris. 어디 라바이나 같이 보지 않지네. 미다고 콤바티니 미다고 님도 콤바다. 남에서 주 탑보 님도 콤바다. 이 건네 모티브 차더라. 이거요 바로. 아. 미다고 님바다. 좋아. 남에서 주 탑고도 님이지나 딜레 딘지게 이거요 집어 차더라. 이거요 비좀 생기니 마고메이나.
So then saying here that one should not meditate on the lack of inherent existence, because there is danger that if one thinks it lacks inherent existence, then one perceives this as truly existent. Well, that danger doesn't really arise, because as discussed before, if by taking to mind, so someone would argue taking to mind the lack of inherent existence would lead to the danger of perceiving the lack of inherent existence as truly existent. If that was the danger that would arise, then meditating on impermanence, for example, perceiving impermanence, that would be a problem, because then if one were to meditate on impermanence, one would perceive impermanence as truly existent. If one were to generate the aspiration towards one's own enlightenment, so taking to mind one's own enlightenment, then one would mistakenly misperceive one's own enlightenment as truly existent. So if that was really such a danger, then all that would result, those would be the consequences.
다 디제디 다오나 텐주 계자 마데디 아니 디르심에 바레다스 sen kombaina tingiti karsa 정말 무지잖아 고에 소리를 듣는 디르심에 바 메바레다 냠도 kom네 마티바레시야시 신다 디제디 디르심에 바레다 레디라 씩씩라 고다니 아니 디라나다 데디시로 데디랑 신기민도 대디랑 심매바레 시나 디거다 다오나 디랑 심매바 레다님도 겁나 되게 말했으리 디레디 무슨 디나신 가르치고래 디 데브레다람나 데스 케버리어 분벌 주고주니 분벌이 하고 살 분벌 주고주니 조지를 주고주니 디 조지레다 라바이나 디나신신 기지 셰바이나 아니 디디 가르레 라신 매바들 라신 매바디 밀러샤 디랑 심매바 세디레다 라고 인규디로다 디 조지레다 세디 조지기 타차레디 조지 랍사디 디레다 라고로 어디나시 디랑 심메바레다 슬레디 라시 메바디 로르샤 아니 딜레 로르샤위 토네 라시 메바시 세디 디레다스 어디라디 디랑 심메바레다 세 딘디치라나 디고버다 디 쿠토니 공나 균제레 라시 메바디 키오제 디랑 심메바시 디레다스 나나 디토니레다스 어다이 다다 자시기 디나는 세워요리 김문지 디토니레다 냠도 겁나 디그마리스 어디 되다 지부지겨 라시메바디는 디라시메바레다 냠도 겁나 디그마리 균진의 순고.
So likewise here, when we talk about the idea of saying, for example, taking to mind, this is the absence of inherent existence. So kind of pointing at the lack of inherent existence and stressing, so this is the lack of inherent existence. That could lead to the sense of the lack of inherent existence actually being inherently existent, in the sense that he's heard this from his holiness. His holiness, he seems to remember having said something to that effect, that saying, this is the lack of inherent existence. There's actually two ways of thinking about it. If we just were to say, the book does not exist inherently, so this book does not exist inherently, or this, with regard to this book, there's the lack of inherent existence. That is okay, that is not a problem. But when I say, this is that book, this is that book, so what is implied by just saying this is that book, is kind of saying a truly existent or inherently existent book, that is such and such. So it kind of stresses that inherent existence. So it's just the way it appears to the mind, this idea that the sense that if I just say something lacks inherent existence, or say, oh, that is the lack of inherent existence, that is that lack of inherent existence, in that moment there's the perception of the lack of inherent existence existing inherently. So with regard to the table or with regard to any other phenomenon, so saying that this is that inherently, that is that lack of inherent existence, it kind of implies to the mind what it seems is that this lack of inherent existence in itself exists truly. So this is what His Holiness has been saying in his commentary on the fundamental wisdom, in that kind of the notes on the teachings on the fundamental wisdom.
제상 단다디 이전 휴자지기 기들티도 기루지기 디송나로라 아니 신의 공비 미팅기 타구이 넘버 차주다도 돈이 진당이 유도 정치도 뭐 쇼하시고 그랬어. 세지.
So likewise, if you look on page 221, it says there's one of Petrarch's texts called "The Lamp Illuminating the Darkness," a guide to the view. So here, Petrarch, what he's saying is that in the same way as the object of meditation, the aspect of the meditation of deity appears when engaging in meditation on calm abiding, one should not allow emptiness to become a distant object of apprehension. So in the same way as the meditation of deity appears, when one engages in meditation on calm abiding, one should not allow emptiness to become distant.
제가 디치도 전에 되게 찍어래. 다 디치니 아니 러시 매도 냠도 코메디 다 기록이 초라이나 제르무시기 다시 디치나 세우도 너네치모 가상님은 어떻게 해야 되나 다시 매도 냠도 된저 동초를 만도 찬스 줘서 디세고도 계속지기 제르무시기 다치나에 따가도 계속지기 다치나에 따가도 지루지기 순간에 따가도 다제에서 손도 기루쳐라 다 디제다 아니 기다쳐와 아니 제 가서 취재다 아니 디나신지기 갈라오래 제한가위로 되다 다디네 군친체 쉐바다 고다드미 드네다 기루초라다 참아 지규드지리샤 개버디기 다티 참에 나와 나시민도 냠도 라시 메도 냠도 거베 숭도
So this explanation is before. So actually, from the mystical point of view, so so saying the lack of true existence. So the lack of true existence that should be taken to mind. So one should meditate on. This is very difficult to express in English. It's just kind of saying lack of true existence, full stop, or lack of the full existence, period. So this is what one should meditate on. So this is Tibetan kind of like period. So that's what one should meditate on, which has been described by Lama Tsongkhapa in his commentary, Ocean of Reasoning, which is a commentary on the fundamental wisdom. It has been said likewise, it has been said in the Lamrim Channel, all these texts have talked about the importance of focusing on just that empty. So likewise in their guides, in the guides on the middle way by Khedrubab Rinpoche, by Gyaltsab Je, so they all have these books called Guide to the Middle Way or Guide to the View. In those texts, likewise, they've described the importance of this, the importance of just focusing on emptiness. And then Geshe-la gave the name of several scholars, which I don't need to do here, Garu Lodra and so forth. So all these scholars have said the same thing.
정말 음식이 숨들다 다다 이제 가고 두버티바 이제 된지지요래 가자 가정기 동상 이제 dimba 두버리도 두버 가자 가정기 동상들라 슈방 팀버신도 제네 루이진다 유도 제시기였어
So likewise here it says on page 228 it's part of the teaching by His Holiness. So this is a book. It looks like a teaching by His Holiness that was made into a book called Notes on the Teachings on the Fundamental Wisdom, in which His Holiness says that so that mere empty of having just so that kind of total empty of having merely negated the object of negation, so one should enter that, one should absorb into that, and that is the kind of object of apprehension, that is the object of the apprehension of the mind.
In a one TV tubular chiktada and the tomba yin she lu zimba yin only jang chidu zimba yin be ch.
So then it says on the same page, so if one thinks that this is emptiness, so apprehending, if the mind apprehends this is emptiness, then this will be the apprehension of seeing emptiness as distant.
That is it, that digi, that tone, Tindina, that Tony, into be share of tomato be share of the Tony Janchedu, Nangiri, Nangamari. So dita there's no to subscribe.
So then the question arises in respect to that, in relation to that, the mind that initially realizes emptiness, the wisdom that initially realizes emptiness, does for that mind the emptiness appear distant or not?
That Tony Tomaru Gomela the machine is that the KI. She's one check as you want to Yabuche, Russian into the commission to take it out. Diane Tony de Vishera de compared to Tatangi, Kishi on the anti-Shin child.
So for someone who initially, newly meditates on emptiness, this is not an important issue. It's not something they need to concern themselves with. All they need to do is identify the object of negation and then refute that object. But for those who have already generated the mind that realizes emptiness, in order to enhance that realization, they should give this issue some thought.
想着说我要怎么样让我的正方会一步一步的往上增进的话，这个问题就必须是一个要处理的问题。
但你那努了那你，我说的到我家住了，那他不是等到你能看我了，他进去知道的，那边生意上不去，这边你自己知道吧？你能，那边生意上不了，你能的，怕我知道这边，但你自己知道你能。我就是能落了，东西都比七八千万的爬下来，就让比那个水，你能约吧嘛？是就让觉得这边那个水，你能约吧的，让决定刚才给用到给你特别比送过了吧？但就让看着水不了呗，你能弄不得那个，你能弄不得嘛？用到谁的？缺角了呗。但就让缺角也利用的，不但同样特别的，你是做营生，刚才可能用到给，但你能读是呢，你没特别去，你能成为原来是，你能原来是去，定期用的，但来等我这把产品搞的，你能有没去过了的，你能兴趣为呢？你能给这些呢讲解让他列着了。
So then with regard to the dawn of dualism, so the kind of the stopping of dualistic appearances here, we'll talk about that. Well, there's a text which is called Nina, which kind of means dual appearance. So in that text by Kapatrudi, I don't know the Sanskrit name right now. Anyway, so Kapatrudi, so one of the commentaries, which is a commentary on the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra in 20,000 verses. So here there's the description of when the dualistic appearance, when that goes away, when that fades, So in general we say that on the path of state, on the path of accumulation, there's still dualistic appearance. And then if you reach the path of preparation, then during the peak level, during the forbearance level, there's still the appearance of dualism. And then there's this description with regard to the Supreme Dharma, that on the Supreme Dharma level, it seems as if the dualistic appearance has faded, but it's still there. It seems that it's faded, but it's actually still there. So even on the level of the Supreme Dharma, so the path of preparation, the four levels, peak, forbearance, and Supreme Dharma, even during the Supreme Dharma level, there's still the subtle dualistic appearance. So there's still an appearance of inherent existence of dualism. So it goes all the way up to that level that one still has such a sense of dualism.
The nyota di kandis the yungu or sin nyota yongdangchi nani chimo na ti jure. Nani chimo ni jesum tati tata shotan dia tata zikiri. Aji tinana padirasana tandas ra tanda chenamla rangi ngwe jubi rangshin tu juba dulzamya mebar tenna pabi rangshingi tombi tongni ni chujin tije. Ani kumzen di sungje ani page chazan lo mawaji kumzen di sungje tar tongni de tendo deba tabawar juros. La di ta khadu la tanchina tanda la ta le tambo kaki ani rangone meba tenna pavegi tindigi tongni di tendo deba tabawar jaruchi tindigi sungor ta la ni chemena lo.
So this is something I don't have the language more here. So in the Lamrim Chamo talks about on page 203 in the Tibetan version. So it speaks about. So in the Lamrim Chamo it speaks about the idea that phenomena not existing. So here the kind of object, the main kind of object here is the lack of inherent existence, the lack of true existence, so not existing inherently, not even a single particle existing truly. So that kind of emptiness, when that is taken to mind initially, that is actually not real emptiness. So in other words, for a beginner, newly meditate on emptiness, the kind of emptiness, which is that lack of true existence, the lack of inherent existence, which is lack of existence, even like a single particle, not even a single particle existing inherently. So that lack of inherent existence, when that is taken to mind by a beginner, the emptiness is still not authentic emptiness. It's not actual emptiness.
That DJ that that's Karlaure. That Kazangi Machiki Sonso, Commander Zana, the Shiaris. Tada Chimona, that Kelly Kabugi, Lumsumiaris, a Shetiers, and Lunchiti.
So someone from Goma Monastery said this to him once that in the special insight section of the Lamrim, there are three kind of statements that are difficult to accept. So one of those statements must be this one.
Jezanta Tindigi Ditabuchi Kashichi Sumzi used to the Nega Tishi Des Jakabuchi. That D and Tishi Jakabu in the Tonche, that and Juchini Shasha Bambu Shashana, and Shavara. That Canadians in Shiv to China, that Negachi Shibuchi, then Yeji, Yon Sigro, that he told.
So likewise with regard to the other issues, there seem to be other kinds of issues, two or three other issues that are difficult to comprehend. So seeing them as difficult, one may just see them as difficult and just leave them and just ignore them and not pay any attention to them. So that is definitely something that you can do. However, if one looks at these issues and goes deeper, one possibly will understand some important points, some essential key points, some key points will become clear. So it could have some benefit by going into these difficult issues and trying to understand them.
Any Pagi Tagidili Kumzendi Disore, Tony Tabaimbi, Kumzendila Nina Maloba Res, Nina Maloba Inza, and Tenda Tabawa Res.
So previously in the Lamrim Chamo, when it said that emptiness here is not authentic emptiness, the reason, so this is the reason, so the reason here is given for saying that the dualistic appearance has not been faded. So therefore, one has not reversed, one has not overcome the dualistic appearance. So therefore, the emptiness that is taken to mind is not authentic emptiness. So this is the given as a reason that the dualistic appearance is still present. This was previously the reason for saying it's not authentic emptiness.
Tabawa was in the Munema Himbala Warden. Tiniba the Tabawa. The Munema is Tony Maris. Jezanta Tony Leninando Chevasamati Tony Leninando Manu Dita Yotachiligdo.
So therefore, there's some different issues. troublesome issue in the sense that does the inferential cognizer that takes to mind emptiness, does that overcome the dualistic appearance or not? Does that kind of eliminate or abandon or does it actually lead to the fading of the dualistic appearance or not?
아니 기주체기 도게 나와는 놀라 가지 손에서는 율때의 니나 유에나 유때의 된남 지지 이침을 깨르치르스. 세나 유때의 니나 유에나 유때의 된남 지지 이침을 이거 말했으라. 디지도 제가 세만디 아니 돈이의 니나 유에나 돈이의 된남 지지 이침을 말했어 이거로.
So Kitruji also says, if a mind, if it is dualistic with regard to its object, if an awareness is dualistic with regard to its object, it cannot be a valid cognizer that analyzes the ultimate.
不是抉择胜义理智的背景。那同样的道理呢，也放漏掉东西。
那第那心机考虑的是呢？ 디단 들어요 저지 양녀를 사고지 내신인 보이는 놀라래 제가 된지 송래 밖에 시부 출비 니된디 군소를 했어 시부 출발 니된지라 군소세는 노르교 주만을 보라 시부 출비 니된디 아니 군소를 했어 시부 마 출비 니된디 아니 밖에 된담을 했어 심다 친지로다 친지만로서 언제 있으나로 언제로 친지로다 친지만로서 다들 보이노스 어디 송는데 전에 따til을 지워 당겨. 지워 가르 당겨서는 안에 돈인디 아니 군소를 해서 시부 출발 인이들도 제가 세마디 돈이도 제가 세마디 출발을 봐서 따 지워 당겨.
So this is a technical issue that is also mentioned, for example, in the eloquent speech, where what is usually described, how conventional truth is usually described. Conventional truth is described as the kind of object that is found by a mistaken consciousness. Whereas ultimate truth is described as an object that is found by a non-mistaken consciousness, a non-mistaken consciousness. And so this also goes back to the auto-commentary on the Supplement of the Middle Way, where it says a distorted and a non-distorted mind are different. So saying that an object that is found by mistaken consciousness, well then the argument would be that emptiness itself is a conventional truth. Emptiness is a conventional truth because it is found by a mind, by an awareness that is mistaken.
지난다 분바디 시부 추비 니바레 가르스나 분지미시 추바레 분지도고 추바레라고 알아. 디다나 돈인데 하기 시부 추비 니바레 지바세모 추비 니도 와서 나도 자부차기도.
For example, we say a vase is a conventional truth because it is found by a mistaken consciousness. So it is found by a mistaken consciousness because it is perceived by a mistaken eye consciousness. It is perceived by a conceptual consciousness which is mistaken. So therefore, given the same reason now for emptiness is also therefore a conventional truth because it is found or is perceived by a inferential cognizer which is mistaken.
다 딜레 심잠지니 본바디 문제 떠바다 본바도 무슨 니가 주고도 돈이디 떠바디 주지마도 무슨 디 주고 말아 제자다 취시 점기 선점들 저와이나 본바디 아니 남편은 남기도 왔어 근데 디원이부터 슬림을
so there are some people
출발 점기 니에바다나 출변이에 봤음기 출변이에 봐 지부기 자만이 봐시 출발 점기 니에바 나와이나 본바디의 출발 점기 니에바 레멘도 맞출어 남친이 얘기도 왔어
So there's some people say that, for example, the vase and the emptiness are not the same because the vase is the object of both a conceptual consciousness that is mistaken and a direct perceiver that is mistaken. But emptiness is only the object of a conceptual consciousness that is mistaken, but it's not the object of a direct perceiver that is mistaken. But then someone else would argue, well, it's not true that the vase is only found by a mistaken consciousness, so whether it's a conceptual consciousness or a direct perceiver, because it's also perceived by an omniscient consciousness, and an omniscient consciousness is not mistaken. So even a vase is found or perceived by a direct perceiver, which in this case is the omniscient consciousness. So another person would argue therefore emptiness and the vast are actually the same.
会这样讲吗？人家生了，这样吗？
您头先伫蓬巴迪就话，温松堂
봄바디 시바 출바 짬기니바 레데요레스 돈이디 시바 출바 짬기니바 마레 마출로 냠샤이시 니기도 하스 람나 봄바디에 마출로 시비 니기도 남친이 니기도 하스.
So Geshe-la repeated this, so saying that some say that the vase is only found by a mistaken consciousness, by a mistaken perceiver, whereas that is not true for emptiness. Emptiness is not just found by a mistaken consciousness, but it is also found or apprehended by a non-mistaken direct perceiver. Then another person would argue, well, even the vase itself is not just the object of mere mistaken consciousness, because it's also the object of a non-mistaken consciousness, because it's the object of the ignition mind of the Buddha.
다 디치디잖아요. 다 케미도 다 세베 다디 요자디 벽에 진입을 진수이디다 들어지 차디고 디치디 슈르지네 야서르와 다 드린데샤.
So anyway, this is not really important here, because we will talk about this again when we investigate how the initial mind of the Buddha perceives conventional phenomena. So this will come up again when we go into this topic. Anyway, so let's leave it at that much.
多年到晚上都是。